Welcome to Gripping Tales. Are you ready for today's video? It starts now.
When you think of Transylvania, you probably picture Dracula's castle and Hollywood vampires. But the real horror stories from this isolated region of Romania have nothing to do with fiction. What I'm about to share with you are 6 true accounts from people who experienced something deeply disturbing in the Carpathian Mountains. These aren't legends passed down through generations. These are recent events, documented and verified. And after hearing them, you might understand why locals still refuse to venture into certain parts of the forest after dark. Here's story number 1, the Hoia Baciu footage. In October 2019, a group of paranormal investigators from Budapest traveled to the Hoia Baciu Forest, just outside Cluj-Napoca. This forest has a reputation. Locals call it the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania. Trees grow in bizarre spiral patterns, and there's a perfectly circular clearing where nothing will grow. The team consisted of 4 people: Alex, the lead investigator, his girlfriend Maria, and 2 friends, David and Stefan. They brought professional equipment, thermal cameras, EMF readers, and multiple recording devices. Their plan was to spend one night in the forest and document any unusual activity. They entered the forest at 8 p.m. just as the sun was setting behind the mountains. Alex was filming on his camera when they reached the clearing around 9:30 p.m. That's when their equipment started malfunctioning. First, the EMF readers spiked to maximum levels, even though there were no power lines for miles. Then the thermal camera picked up something moving between the trees, something that registered as significantly colder than the surrounding air. Maria was the first to hear the whispers. She described them as voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize, coming from multiple directions at once. On the recording, which was later posted to their YouTube channel before being quickly taken down, you can hear her asking, "Does anyone else hear that?" The others confirm they hear it too. Then David screams. According to his statement to police, he saw a figure standing approximately 20 feet away, watching them from between 2 twisted trees. But here's what makes this truly disturbing. When Alex pointed his flashlight in that direction, there was nothing there. However, the thermal camera, which was still recording, showed a humanoid shape in that exact spot, a shape that was registering at nearly 20 degrees below the ambient temperature. The team ran. In their panic, they left most of their equipment behind. When they emerged from the forest 3 hours later, a journey that should have taken 30 minutes, Stefan was missing. Police searched the forest for 4 days. They found Stefan on the 5th day, sitting at the base of one of the spiral trees, completely catatonic. He was hospitalized for severe hypothermia and psychological trauma. When he finally spoke, 2 weeks later, all he would say was, "They showed me where I'm going to die." Stefan refused to elaborate. He still lives in Budapest, but according to friends, he hasn't been the same. He barely sleeps, and he's covered the windows of his apartment with blackout curtains. The thermal camera footage? It disappeared from their channel, and the team won't discuss what else was on it. And to story number 2, the Bran Village rental. In the summer of 2021, an American couple, I'll call them James and Rebecca to protect their privacy, rented a traditional Romanian cottage near Bran Castle for a 2-week vacation. They found it on a rental website, and the price seemed too good to be true. A beautiful stone cottage, over 200 years old, nestled in the mountains with stunning views. The photos looked perfect. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Ionescu, met them on their first day. Through broken English and hand gestures, she gave them one clear instruction: do not open the cellar door. It is old, dangerous to walk. Stay upstairs only. For the first 3 days, everything was fine. They explored the area, visited the castle, took photos of the scenery. But on the 4th night, Rebecca woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound coming from below. It was a rhythmic thumping, slow, deliberate, coming from the cellar. Thump, thump, thump. Like someone hammering something or dropping something heavy on the floor. Over and over. Then it stopped. The next morning, they mentioned it to a neighbor who spoke English. The neighbor's face went pale. "Mrs. Ionescu's husband," she said quietly. "He died in that cellar. 10 years ago. She found him at the bottom of the stairs. Broke his neck. That should have been enough for them to leave. But they'd already paid for 2 weeks, and they convinced themselves it was just old house sounds. Pipes? Settling wood? Anything rational? On the 6th night, Rebecca woke up again. This time, she was facing the bedroom door. And in the darkness, she could see it was open. She knew, absolutely knew, they had closed and locked it before bed. Standing in the doorway was the silhouette of a man. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. She just watched as this figure stood there, completely still, for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute. Then it turned and walked away. She heard footsteps going down the stairs, heard the cellar door open with its distinctive creak. When she finally found her voice, she woke James. He grabbed a flashlight, and despite Rebecca begging him not to, he went downstairs. The front door was still locked from the inside. Every window was latched, but the cellar door, the one Mrs. Ionescu had warned them about, was wide open. James shined his light down the stairs. The cellar was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, with a dirt floor and stone walls. And there, in the dirt, were fresh footprints. Bare feet, leading from the bottom of the stairs to the far wall where they simply stopped. They left that night, didn't even pack everything, just grabbed their passports and drove to a hotel in Brasov. When they tried to contact Mrs. Ionescu for a refund, her number was disconnected. The rental listing had been removed from the website. But here's what still haunts them. When James looked at the photos he'd taken of the cottage on their first day, there was something in one of them they hadn't noticed before. In a photo of the living room, reflected in the mirror on the wall, you can see the cellar door in the background. And in the darkness beyond that door, there's a pale face looking directly at the camera. They never got an explanation, they never went back. The Night Shepherd is story number 3. This story comes from a Romanian man named Andrei, a shepherd who worked in the mountains near Sighisoara. In 2020, during the pandemic lockdowns, he was staying in a remote mountain shelter with his flock, completely isolated from civilization. The shelter was basic: 4 walls, a roof, a wood stove, and a single window. Cell phone reception was non-existent up there. The nearest village was a 3-hour walk. Andrei had done this work for 15 years. He was used to solitude, used to the sounds of the mountains at night, the wolves howling, the wind through the trees, the movements of the sheep in their pen outside. But on his 4th night at this particular shelter, one he'd never stayed at before, something was different. He woke up around midnight to complete silence. No wind, no animals, nothing. In the mountains, silence like that isn't natural. There's always some sound. Then he heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy footsteps circling the shelter. He assumed it was a bear or maybe a large wolf, so he grabbed his rifle and went to the window. What he saw made no sense. There was a figure walking around the sheep pen. A person dressed in what looked like very old clothing, a long dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat. The figure moved with an odd, stiff gait, like their joints didn't bend properly. Andrei shouted at them in Romanian, asking who they were and what they wanted. The figure stopped walking. Slowly, so slowly it didn't seem human, the head turned toward the shelter, toward the window where Andrei stood. Even from 20 feet away, even in the moonlight, Andrei could see there was something wrong with the face. It was too pale, too smooth, like a mask, but it was moving. The figure raised one arm and pointed directly at him. Then it spoke. Andrei swears he heard it clearly, even through the walls. 3 days. That's all it said. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing into the tree line. Andrei didn't sleep the rest of that night. At first light, he checked the area where the figure had been standing. The ground was soft dirt, and there should have been footprints, but there was nothing. The only prints were from his own boots. He seriously considered leaving right then, but he had a job to do, and in daylight he convinced himself he'd been dreaming or hallucinating. Altitude sickness, maybe. Lack of sleep. The second night it came back. Same time. Same silence. Same slow circling of the sheep pen. This time, when it pointed at him, it said 2 days. On the 3rd night, Andrei was ready to run. He had his pack prepared, his rifle loaded. But the figure appeared earlier this time, just after sunset. It didn't circle the pen. It walked straight to the shelter door and stood there. Andre could see its shadow through the gap at the bottom of the door. Then it knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Andre pressed himself against the far wall, rifle aimed at the door, and waited. The knocking came again. 3 times. Then again. This continued for 6 hours. Finally, at midnight, the figure spoke one last time. Tomorrow. Then the footsteps walked away, and Andre heard the sheep, which had been silent all night, suddenly crying out in panic. He left before dawn, abandoned the flock, abandoned his gear, and didn't stop moving until he reached the village. When the owner of the flock went to check on the shelter 3 days later, he found something disturbing. All the sheep were dead. Not killed by wolves or bears. There were no wounds. They had simply died all at the same time, and their bodies had been arranged in a perfect circle around the shelter. Andre never worked as a shepherd again. He still lives in Sighisoara, but he refuses to go near the mountains. When asked what he thinks the figure was, he says something in Romanian that roughly translates to the old death. Something that predates Christianity, predates recorded history. Something that still walks the mountains, counting down days for reasons we don't understand. Story number 4 is the Sibiu apartment. In early 2022, a young woman named Elena moved to Sibiu for university. She found a cheap apartment in the old town, a 1-bedroom place in a building that dated back to the 1600s. The landlord was eager to rent it, which should have been her first warning sign. The apartment had strange features. There were old iron hooks embedded in the ceiling beams. The windows had bars on them, but on the inside rather than the outside. And there was a large wooden door in the bedroom that had been nailed shut and painted over. Elena asked the landlord about these things. He waved them off. Old building, old design, very historic, very authentic. She moved in during October. For the first 2 weeks, everything was fine. Then she started noticing small things going wrong. Items would be moved. She'd leave her keys on the kitchen counter and find them on her bed. Books would be on different shelves than where she'd put them. At first, she thought she was just forgetful or stressed from her studies. Then she started hearing scratching sounds coming from behind the sealed bedroom door. Soft at first, easy to ignore, but each night it got louder. By the end of the first month, it sounded like someone was clawing at the wood from the other side, trying to get out. Elena did some research on the building. She found old municipal records in the city library. The building had been used for various purposes over the centuries, but there was a 50-year period in the 1700s where there were no records at all. Just a gap in the documentation. She asked her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Popescu, if she knew anything about the building's history. The old woman's reaction was immediate and frightening. She grabbed Elena's arm and said, "You live in apartment 3? You need to leave tonight." When Elena pressed her for details, Mrs. Popescu would only say that terrible things had happened in that apartment long ago, that the church had blessed it multiple times, that no tenant stayed more than a few months before fleeing. That night, Elena decided she would look for a new place in the morning. But first, she needed to know what was behind that sealed door. She used a crowbar to pry off the boards. The old nails came out easily, too easily, like they weren't actually supporting anything. When the last board came off, she pulled the door open. The room beyond was small, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet. No windows. The walls were covered in scratches, thousands of them, carved deep into the plaster and stone. And written over and over in what looked like Romanian from centuries ago was a phrase Elena roughly translated as, "She won't let me leave." In the center of the room was a single wooden chair, and on that chair, coiled neatly, was a long braid of human hair. Not modern hair. This was brittle, ancient, but still somehow intact. Elena stumbled backward out of the room. That's when she heard it. A woman's voice, speaking in Old Romanian, coming from inside that tiny chamber. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood enough. Someone was asking for help. Elena ran from the apartment. She called the landlord from outside the building, told him she was breaking the lease and would not be returning. He didn't argue. In fact, he said something that chilled her. "You lasted longer than most." The police investigated after Elena filed a report, but they found nothing unusual. The sealed room was empty, except for dust. No chair, no hair, no scratches on the walls. But Elena knows what she saw. And sometimes, late at night in her new apartment across town, she still hears scratching sounds. Faint, distant, like they're coming from very far away, or like something followed her and is patiently scratching at a door she can't see, waiting to be let in. And here's story number 5, the Corpse Road. There's an old mountain road between the villages of Moiechu and Bran that locals call Drumul Mortalor, the Road of the Dead. Centuries ago, it was used to transport bodies from remote mountain communities to the valley for burial. In November 2021, 2 friends, Christian and Bogdan, were driving this road late at night, returning from a hiking trip. They knew the road's reputation, but they're both skeptics. They don't believe in ghost stories. Around 11 p.m., their car broke down. Just stopped running in the middle of nowhere, on a stretch of road surrounded by dense forest. No cell service, no houses nearby, and the nearest village was at least 5 miles in either direction. They decided to wait until morning, rather than walk in the dark. They locked the doors and settled in, using their phones sparingly to conserve battery. At midnight, they saw headlights approaching from behind. An old car, something from the 1970s, moving very slowly. It passed them without stopping, and they could see there were people inside. 4 or 5 figures in the car, though the windows were dirty and it was hard to make out details. Christian and Bogdan waved and shouted for help, but the car just kept going at that same slow, steady pace until it disappeared around a curve. 15 minutes later, the same car came from the same direction. Same slow speed, same route. It passed them again without stopping. This happened 7 times over the next 2 hours. The same car, approaching from behind, passing them, disappearing around the curve. But here's what made them start to panic. The road behind them was a dead end. It terminated at an abandoned mine shaft about a mile back. There was nowhere for this car to be coming from. On the 8th pass, Christian made a decision. When the car approached, he ran into the road, forcing it to stop. He went to the driver's window to ask for help. The driver rolled down the window. Christian said the man's face was wrong somehow. The proportions weren't quite right, and his skin had a waxy quality to it. But what really disturbed him was that the man and all the passengers were wearing old funeral clothes, dark suits from another era. The driver looked at Christian and said, in perfect Romanian, "Get back in your car, lock the doors, do not leave until sunrise, do not look in your mirrors." Then he rolled up the window and drove away. Christian returned to their car, shaking. They locked the doors and tried to follow the instruction about not looking in the mirrors. But Bogdan couldn't help himself. In the rearview mirror, he saw something that made him scream. Walking up the road behind them, stretching back as far as he could see, was a procession of people. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. All wearing old clothing, all walking in complete silence, all moving toward their car. They were close now. Close enough that Bogdan could see their faces, and that's when he realized these weren't people. They couldn't be. Their movements were wrong, stiff and jerky, like puppets on strings. The procession reached the car and began to flow around it like water around a stone. Christian and Bogdan sat frozen, watching through the windows as these figures passed within inches of the glass. Some of them turned their heads to look inside. Their eyes were hollow, completely black. This lasted for over an hour, an endless stream of the dead walking their ancient route. Finally, as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the last figure passed by. And then, just like that, the road was empty again. Their car started on the first try. They drove straight to the police in Bran and reported what they'd seen. The officer who took their statement didn't seem surprised. He just nodded and said, "You're not the first. But you are lucky. Sometimes people don't follow the instructions. Those people don't make it to sunrise." When they asked what he meant, he wouldn't elaborate. But he did show them a file of missing persons cases along that stretch of road. 14 people in the last 30 years. All disappeared on that road at night, all on dates near November 1st, the Day of the Dead. None of them were ever found. Christian and Bogdan no longer drive at night in rural Romania. And they never, ever use that road again. This final story, the Poenari Citadel experience, is the most recent and the most disturbing. In September 2023, a group of 5 tourists hired a local guide to take them to Poenari Citadel, the real castle of Vlad the Impaler. It's a partially ruined fortress high in the mountains, reached by climbing 480 concrete steps. The guide, Radu, had made this trip hundreds of times. He knew every story, every historical detail. But he also knew the rules. Never stay after dark, never explore the ruins alone, and never go down to the old dungeon level. The group reached the citadel around 4 p.m. They had about 2 hours before they needed to descend. Everything was normal until one of the tourists, a woman from Germany named Heineke, found a narrow opening in one of the walls that led down into a lower level. Radu immediately told her not to go down there, but Heineke was curious, and against his strong protests, she slipped through the opening with her flashlight. The others waited. After 5 minutes, they called down to her. No response. After 10 minutes, 2 of the other tourists went down to look for her. They found her standing in what appeared to be an old storage chamber, staring at the wall. When they touched her shoulder, she screamed, a sound Radu said he'll never forget. Pure, primal terror. Heineke was incoherent. They had to physically carry her back up and out of the citadel. As they were descending the steps, she kept repeating something in German. One of the other tourists translated, "He's still there, he's waiting, he remembers all of them." They got her to a hospital in Curtea de Argeș. Physically, she was fine. Mentally, she was in severe shock. When she finally calmed down enough to speak clearly, she told them what she'd seen in that chamber. The walls were covered in names, thousands of them, carved into the stone. Names in various languages and scripts, some so old they were barely legible. And underneath each name was a date. Heineke said she was reading these names when she realized they were all people who had died at the citadel, victims of Vlad Tepes, going back over 500 years. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was that at the very end of the wall there were 5 fresh carvings, names that looked like they'd been carved recently. The stone dust was still on the floor beneath them, and they were the names of the 5 tourists in her group. Underneath each name was tomorrow's date. Heineke wanted to leave Romania immediately. The others were skeptical but unsettled. Radu, however, took it seriously. He'd heard stories about that lower chamber, stories that predated the citadel's use as a tourist site. He convinced them all to go to the village church and speak with the priest. The priest listened to their story and performed a blessing ritual for each of them. He gave them each a small religious icon and told them not to be alone, especially after dark. 4 of the 5 tourists left Romania the next day. Heineke was still too traumatized to travel. She stayed in the hospital under observation. The next night, the date that had been carved under their names, 2 of the tourists who had flown home died. 1 in Hamburg, 1 in Brussels. Both died in their sleep, no apparent cause. The autopsies were inconclusive. The other 2 tourists who survived? They were the ones who kept the icons the priest had given them, the ones who took the blessing seriously. Heineke eventually recovered enough to return to Germany. She still has the icon. She wears it every day. And she's never been back to Romania, never plans to return. Radu still works as a guide, but he refuses to take tourists to Poenari anymore. When asked why, he says, "Some places remember, some places keep records, and some places aren't finished collecting what they're owed." The local authorities sealed off that lower chamber. Officially, they say it's because of structural instability. But Radu knows the truth. They didn't want anyone else to see what's carved on those walls. Because apparently, the names don't stop. Every few months, new ones appear. Names of people who visited the citadel. Names that show up before anything happens to them. And according to Radu, there's always a date carved underneath, always tomorrow. These 6 stories all have one thing in common. They happened in Transylvania, a place where the line between history and horror has always been thin, where ancient beliefs still hold power, and where the past doesn't always stay buried. If you've had your own experience in Romania or Eastern Europe, Something you can't explain? Something that still keeps you up at night? Leave a comment below or submit your story through the link in the description. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, some places earn their dark reputations for a reason.
Thanks for watching. Every ending hides the beginning of another tale, and ours is already on its way. Stay tuned. You'll find the next chapter right here, and soon.